I bought the house with my own savings, after years of working 2 jobs and sacrificing every ounce of free time. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had something solid under my feet. I thought my parents would be proud of me, but instead, the moment they realized the house was in my name, everything changed. At first, they acted like they were happy. They even moved in temporarily because their rental lease ended. I didn't mind. I thought it was family, helping family. But soon, my younger brother Daniel started staying over more and more. He had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one they spoiled while I was left to figure life out on my own. Within weeks, I realized I was no longer the homeowner in their eyes. They treated Daniel like the prince of the house. He got the master bedroom my bedroom because my parents said, "He needs the space more than you do." I was pushed into the smaller guest room. They started rearranging furniture, redecorating, and acting like this was their home, not mine. The breaking point came when I came home from work one day to find my things packed in boxes by the front door. My parents stood there, completely serious, and told me it would be better if I moved out for a while so Daniel could focus on his future without distractions. They said since I didn't have kids and wasn't married, I didn't need the space. I was speechless. This was my house. My name was on the deed. I had worked my entire life for this. I refused, of course. I told them they had no right. But instead of apologizing, they doubled down. They called me selfish, claiming family should come first. Daniel stood there smug, saying nothing, like he was entitled to everything I worked for. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake replaying every childhood memory where I was overlooked, every time Daniel was praised while I was ignored, every sacrifice I had made. The next morning, I went to a lawyer. By the end of the week, they were served with eviction papers. The day they left, my mother cried, saying I had betrayed the family. My father shook his head in disappointment. And Daniel? He just glared at me like I had ruined his perfect life. But as the door closed behind them, I finally felt free. It wasn't easy. I cried too because no one dreams of evicting their own parents. But I reminded myself I had bought this house. I had earned this life, and I was done being treated like I didn't matter. Now, when I sit in my living room, surrounded by the quiet I once feared, I feel something I never did before: peace. And for the first time in years, I know this home, my home, will never again be taken from me. After they left, I thought things would calm down, but I underestimated just how entitled my family could be. My phone started blowing up with calls and texts from relatives. My aunt accused me of destroying the family bond. My cousins called me greedy. Even my grandmother said I should let Daniel have the house since he was the one who deserved a stable life. It was unbelievable. No one cared that I had spent years saving for this house. No one cared about the double shifts, the sleepless nights, the skipped vacations. They only cared that the golden child didn't get what he wanted. Daniel, of course, played the victim. He posted on social media about being betrayed by his own sibling. He painted himself as homeless and heartbroken, while conveniently leaving out the fact that he was driving a brand new car my parents had bought him last year and had never worked a full-time job in his life. People who didn't know the whole story rushed to defend him, calling me heartless. For a while, I almost doubted myself. I wondered if I had gone too far. But then I'd sit in my quiet living room, look at the deed with my name on it, and remind myself I wasn't wrong. They were. Still, the pressure didn't stop. My parents started showing up uninvited, banging on my door, begging me to reconsider. At one point, my dad even said, "If you truly love your family, you'll hand the house over to your brother. He has more potential than you ever did." That one cut deeper than anything. I realized then that this wasn't about the house. It was about the fact that, in their eyes, I had never been good enough. No matter what I achieved, no matter what I provided, Daniel would always come first. And that's when I made a decision that would shock them all. I stopped answering their calls, and when they started showing up at the house again, I installed security cameras. The first night I watched the footage, I couldn't believe it. Daniel tried to sneak into the backyard and peek through the windows. It was like he truly believed he still had some claim over my home. The next morning, I went straight to the police and filed a report for harassment and trespassing. It wasn't easy, trust me. No one wants to involve the police with their own family, but enough was enough. When the officer came by to give them a warning, My parents acted outraged, like I was the one crossing the line. That night, Daniel sent me a text that made my blood boil. "You might own the house on paper, but everyone knows it should have been mine. You'll regret this." Instead of arguing, I took screenshots and saved every message. I knew better than to engage. A few days later, my parents tried a different tactic. They called a family meeting at my uncle's house. Against my better judgment, I went. The second I walked in, it was like an ambush. Everyone sat around the living room, lecturing me about forgiveness and sacrifice. They said family was more important than property and that I should just give the house to Daniel since he's younger and has his whole life ahead of him. I looked around the room listening to people who hadn't lifted a finger to help me when I was struggling, people who never offered me a couch to sleep on when I worked 18-hour days. And now, suddenly, they were experts on fairness. I stood up, calm but firm, and said, "You all think this is about a house. It's not. It's about the fact that you've treated me like I was disposable my entire life. This house is mine, and no one is taking it from me. If any of you think otherwise, I'll see you in court." The room went silent. My uncle shifted uncomfortably, my aunt's jaw dropped, and my dad's face turned red. But for once, they had no comeback. That was the night I stopped being afraid of them. After that family ambush, things got even uglier. Daniel doubled down on his pity act, telling everyone he was basically homeless because of me. The irony? He was still living with my parents in their rented apartment, eating their food, driving their car, not paying a cent for anything. Yet people kept calling me the selfish one. One evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, I noticed spray paint on my garage door. Big red letters. Thief. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who had done it. I checked my cameras, and sure enough, there was Daniel, with a can of paint in his hand, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't even hesitate. I sent the footage straight to the police. They showed up at my parents' apartment the next morning. My mom called me crying, saying I had ruined Daniel's future, because now he had a criminal record. I almost laughed at the hypocrisy, apparently. I was supposed to sacrifice my life, my home, and now even my safety just to keep his record clean? But what really pushed me over the edge was when I found out Daniel had tried to list my house on a rental website without my permission. He used photos he had taken months ago when he was living there. Imagine my shock when I got an inquiry email from a stranger asking if the place was still available. That was it. I went back to my lawyer, handed over the evidence, and we filed a restraining order against Daniel. When my parents found out, they came storming to my front yard, yelling, crying, even threatening to disown me. Neighbors watched from their porches, whispering. But instead of being embarrassed, I felt something I never thought I would: power. For the first time in my life, they couldn't control me anymore. I looked my dad straight in the eye and said, "You taught me that Daniel's future was worth more than mine. Well, this is my future, and I'm not giving it up. You can choose to respect that, or you can stay out of my life." The look on his face told me he never thought I'd stand up to him, but it was too late. A week after the restraining order went through, the shift finally started. Daniel couldn't show up at my house anymore without risking jail, so he turned all his energy into whining on social media. He posted vague quotes about betrayal and family greed, and his friends showered him with pity. But slowly, people started asking questions he couldn't answer, like why he didn't have a job at 26, or why he thought he was entitled to a house he didn't buy. Then came the real blow. I heard through a cousin that Daniel had applied for a management program at a big company. On paper, it looked promising, but when they ran his background check, the vandalism charge showed up. He was rejected immediately. My parents blamed me, of course, but deep down, I knew Daniel had only himself to blame. Meanwhile, my parents' lease was up, and they couldn't afford to renew. For years, they had been covering Daniel's expenses instead of saving, and now they were on the verge of losing their own place. They actually had the nerve to show up at my doorstep again and ask if they could, temporarily, move back in until they got on their feet. I didn't even let them pass the door. I reminded them of the night they packed my things into boxes and told me I didn't need the house. My voice didn't shake this time. I said, "No, I'm making mine. I live here alone." And I closed the door in their faces. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left outside. Daniel spiraled after that. His posts went from self-pity to outright bitterness. People began unfollowing him, tired of the drama. And when my parents finally admitted to the rest of the family that they were nearly broke, the same relatives who had attacked me at that meeting suddenly stopped calling. I could feel the balance tipping. For once, I wasn't the scapegoat. They were. Daniel's downfall came quicker than I expected. Word got around about the restraining order and the vandalism, and people who once sang his praises started keeping their distance. His reputation as the golden boy shattered. Even the relatives who once lectured me stopped mentioning his name at gatherings they didn't want to be tied to his mess. Meanwhile, he tried applying for smaller jobs, but every time a background check came up, he was rejected. Employers didn't want someone who had been caught vandalizing their own siblings' property. My parents begged me to talk to someone and get the charge removed, but I refused. I told them, he made his own choices. I'm not cleaning up after him. That was the first time I saw real fear in my parents' eyes. They had spent their lives shielding him from consequences, and now they realized they couldn't. As for me, my life finally started to look like what I had dreamed of when I bought the house. I decorated it the way I wanted, invited real friends over, and for the first time, I woke up in the morning without dread. The peace was priceless, but then Daniel made one last desperate move. He messaged me from a new account, begging for a chance to make things right. He said he had nowhere left to go, no one left to help him, and that he just needed a place to start over. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me, the old me, wanted to give in, to play the role of the forgiving sibling. But then I remembered the boxes by the door, the spray paint on my garage, the smug grin when he thought he'd won. I deleted the message without replying. That night, sitting in my living room, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's finally living the life they swore you'd never have. Daniel hit rock bottom faster than anyone expected. A mutual friend told me he was couch surfing, bouncing from one acquaintance to another until people got tired of him eating their food and refusing to look for work. Eventually, no one wanted him around. Then came the public humiliation. Someone from our extended family leaked the security footage of him spray painting my garage. It spread through our town's Facebook groups like wildfire. Suddenly, the poor victim narrative he had spun online collapsed. People mocked him, calling him entitled and spoiled. Even the neighbors who used to nod politely at my parents avoided them in public. My mom called me one night, her voice shaking. He's been crying all day. He says he has nothing left. Please, just let him stay with you until he gets back on his feet. I took a deep breath and said calmly, you chose him over me my whole life. You kicked me out of my own house to make him comfortable. And now you want me to sacrifice everything again? No, I won't. She hung up on me, sobbing. But instead of guilt, I felt relief. For once, I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. In the weeks that followed, I started seeing my parents and brother less and less. My focus shifted back to myself, my career, my friends, my peace. I realized that sometimes blood isn't family. Respect, trust, and love are what make a family, and they had thrown those away long ago. The golden child was no longer golden, and me, I was finally shining on my own. The final straw came months later. I got a letter in the mail. It was from my parents' lawyer. They were trying to sue me, claiming I had unfairly evicted them from their family home. I almost laughed out loud. The house had never been theirs. My name was on the deed. The mortgage was in my name, and every cent that had built it was mine. I took the letter straight to my lawyer, who shook his head and said, this won't go anywhere. If they want to drag it to court, they'll embarrass themselves. And he was right. The case was dismissed immediately. The judge even scolded them for wasting the court's time. When word got out, it was the final nail in their reputation. Extended family members who once defended them stopped taking their calls. Neighbors whispered about how pathetic it was to sue their own child out of greed. And Daniel, he didn't even show up to the hearing. He was too busy trying to scrape together part-time work just to survive. For me, that was the moment everything came full circle. The people who once told me I was disposable were left with nothing. And I, the one they cast aside, was thriving. My home was mine, my peace was intact, and my future was finally free of their control. I stood in the living room that night, looking around at the house I had fought so hard to protect. The silence was no longer heavy, it was beautiful, and I realized something. They hadn't kicked me out of my own life. I had kicked them out of mine. After the failed lawsuit, I thought they might finally back off. But Daniel wasn't done humiliating himself. He showed up at my work one afternoon, causing a scene in the parking lot. He shouted that I stole his future and that he deserved the house because he was the younger sibling. My coworkers stopped and stared, some even recording on their phones. I didn't argue. I simply walked past him and went inside. Later, I found out the videos had gone viral on local social media pages. The comments were brutal. People called him entitled, lazy, and pathetic. Some even pointed out the irony that the golden child had turned into nothing more than a public embarrassment. My parents tried to spin it, of course. They claimed I had driven Daniel to desperation. But no one believed them anymore. Their golden image had crumbled, and they were left exposed for what they really were, enablers of a spoiled child. The best part? My boss called me into her office the next day. I expected her to be upset about the scene, but instead she said, "You handled that with composure." Most people would have exploded. A month later, I got promoted. It was poetic justice. The house I fought for had become my sanctuary, and the life I built inside those walls was proof that I had been right to stand my ground. Meanwhile, Daniel's tantrum had backfired. He lost what few friends he had left, and even family members started ignoring his calls. For the first time in his life, no one was rushing to pick up the pieces for him, and I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. Life was delivering it for me. Daniel's ultimate breaking point came sooner than I thought. After the viral parking lot meltdown, word spread everywhere. Old school friends, former neighbors, even his ex-girlfriends piled into the comments, each sharing their own story about how spoiled and entitled he had always been. His reputation was shredded beyond repair. With no job prospects and no friends left to lean on, Daniel turned back to the only people who had ever enabled him, my parents. But they were already drowning. Their lease ended, their savings gone, and now their social circle had abandoned them too. When I heard they were staying in a rundown motel on the edge of town, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just emptiness. Then one night, my mom called. Her voice was shaky, softer than I'd ever heard it. She said, "We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. Please, help us." I closed my eyes and let her words sink in. For years, I had begged for even a fraction of that concern. For years, I wanted them to see me, to value me, to love me the way they worshiped Daniel. And now, when they had nothing left, suddenly, I was their only option. I spoke carefully, but firmly. "I built my life without your help. I gave you chance after chance, and you chose Daniel every single time. I can't save you now. You'll have to figure it out the same way I did on your own." The silence on the other end was deafening before she finally hung up. That night, sitting in the quiet of my house, I realized something. I wasn't just free of them. I was untouchable. They couldn't guilt me, manipulate me, or steal from me anymore. The golden child had fallen. The parents who enabled him had crumbled. And me? I was still standing. In the months that followed, I hardly heard from them. A cousin mentioned that Daniel was working odd jobs under the table, barely scraping by, while my parents bounced from relative to relative, wearing out their welcome everywhere they went. They had become a burden, and people were finally seeing them the way I had always seen them. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. My promotion brought in a better salary, and with it, I started making the house truly mine. I renovated the kitchen, planted a garden out back, and for the first time, I actually invited friends over for barbecues and game nights. My home wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a place filled with laughter and peace. Slowly, I built a circle of people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. Friends who showed up without conditions. Colleagues who respected my hard work. Even neighbors who stopped by with homemade pies or offers to help with projects. It felt strange at first being surrounded by genuine kindness but also healing. One evening, sitting by the fire pit in my backyard with friends, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I hadn't lost a family. I had gained a new one that I had chosen, one that chose me back. And that's when it finally hit me. I didn't just win by keeping my house. I won by breaking free from a cycle that was never going to change. My parents and Daniel could keep chasing illusions, but I had built something real. For the first time, I was living, not just surviving. Months later, I drove past that old motel on the edge of town. I saw my parents' car parked there, dented and rusting, and for a split second, I almost pulled in. But then I remembered the boxes at the door, the spray paint on my garage, the way they told me I didn't deserve my own home. I kept driving. As I pulled into my driveway, my house glowing warmly in the evening light, I felt a calm I never thought I'd have. The silence wasn't lonely anymore, it was freedom. Every wall, every room, every corner carried the weight of my struggle and the proof of my victory. I realized then that I didn't need their approval, their love, or their presence to be whole. I had carved my own path, built my own future, and protected what was mine. They had lost everything because they couldn't let go of their obsession with Daniel. And me? I had gained everything because I finally let go of them. This house wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was a symbol of every sacrifice, every battle, and every stand I had taken for myself. And as I locked the door behind me, I smiled. Because this time, no one could ever kick me out again. Years passed, and life only grew brighter for me. My career flourished. My circle of friends became a true, chosen family, and every corner of my home radiated with warmth and peace. I hosted dinners, celebrated milestones, and built memories that were mine alone, untainted by manipulation or favoritism. Every now and then, whispers of my parents and Daniel reached me. He had drifted from one failed job to another, still blaming everyone but himself. My parents, once so proud and controlling, were now shadows of their former selves, living quietly and depending on handouts from relatives who pitied them. The golden pedestal they built for Daniel had crumbled, and with it, so had they. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel satisfaction. What I felt was freedom. Their downfall wasn't my victory. It was simply the natural consequence of years of choices they had made. My victory was standing on my own, unshaken, and finally at peace. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset over my neighborhood, I thought back to the night they packed my things into boxes, telling me I didn't belong in the house I bought. If only they could see me now, stronger, happier, and finally free. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth. And in the end, I didn't just keep my home. I kept my dignity, my future, and my life. And that was the greatest victory of all.